Okay, should we start?
You're 3 minutes over, Jude.
All right. Well, let's start then.
4 minutes over.
Okay. Avatar Meher Baba.
Jai.
So this is the last of this series of sessions we've had this year on special studies in Meher Baba and the world's great spiritual traditions. That's the topic of this whole group. And this one is the Sufi themes of Fana and Baqa in Meher Baba's Cosmology. I know this is a burning question for all of you. I don't know how acquainted you are with Fana and Baqa.
No.
But,
You might have to define it.
okay, we might get around to that. But this is, these are very central terms within Sufism.
Just before it's our kids coming, should we
Oh.
get a chair?
Uh-huh.
Just by the way, Talbot, what's his name? Alan said,
Yeah.
he said he doesn't mind the Fana, but he can pass on the Baqa. And Bernard yesterday said he likes the Fana, as in F-U-N-E-R.
Funner.
Yeah, he wants it to be
He
Fana.
wants the funner to come back on.
Yeah.
I lost it. I want my funner to come back. Yeah. Well, these are really major ideas within Sufism. And just in general reflection on this is, I have no idea if this could stand up to critical scrutiny over time, but it appears to me that Meher Baba's, did I use the word darshana before?
Yes.
I hate the word philosophy. It's just so woefully inadequate. So the worldview that he has presented and revealed to the world is darshana. Darshana means sight. So if you don't mind, I use that word as a substitute because English doesn't have a good alternate. But his darshana seems to me to be closest, most affiliated to Sufism. And that's sort of a mix of the darshanas, the philosophies, the systems, India, most particularly Vedanta. And in some of these charts in God Speaks, you'll see terms correlated between Sufism, Vedanta, and Christian mysticism. It seems to me that Christian mysticism really means just the English language, since the terms there are not particularly Christian mystical terms. And so it really seems to me to be the Vedantic and the Sufi. And it also seems to me to sort itself out in a certain way. And I submit this to for your consideration. Baba's grounding, or I won't say grounding, affiliation with Vedanta is most visible in what we could say his ontology or his metaphysics, or I know those words may not be friendly ones, in his account of what exists, of what is real. And that would be because it was within Vedanta that the view was really articulated that God alone is real. Or beyond that the soul and God, Atman and Brahman, Atman and Paramatma, are identical. That the drop is the ocean. That was really the great revolutionary insight that Vedanta gave to the world. And the monotheistic religions have a very hard time going there. They can go close, but to go all the way always crosses the line into heresy in those religions. A few did it, and some of them suffered the consequences. So Baba's, and even the great Sufis, I don't feel even they quite get to the point of saying, I am God. But Vedanta did. So Baba's fundamental account of what is real, that I am God, and that the goal of the journey is to have the I am God experience, self-realization, that's really Vedanta more than anything else. But where Sufism really comes into the picture, as far as I can see, is Sufism really, the early centuries of Sufism, I'm not a Sufi scholar, so I may be just full of bullshit, okay? But this is the best of what I can see. They weren't really interested in philosophy for several centuries. They weren't interested in systematic theology or anything like that. But they were really interested in was the actual path. And the reason was that they had sheiks and Mureeds who were actually trying to live the spiritual life. And probably a lot of them were having experiences, or they were trying, and they came up with a vocabulary.
It was very much experience-centered, wasn't it? On states and stations.
Yes, hal and muquam. Those words are in the back of God Speaks too. And they came up with a language to talk about it with. And so in that respect, Baba's seems to draw on Sufism in that way. And hal and muquam would be, and hal means a state, and muquam means a station. Those are really big ideas within Sufism.
And what's that name? State and station, how does that differ?
When a station is a place on the path that you arrive at, and a state is your experience, to say, of intoxication at a moment.
Here today, gone tomorrow.
Yeah, it passes. But once we could say, like in Baba's account, you could characterize a plane as a muquam, for example. But the state would be the intoxication of the moment, the experience you're in at the moment. So there's a lot of discussion of this in Sufism, and you'll find it in the supplement to God Speaks too. That would be a worthy topic for us, one of these sessions. But probably the one that comes up most in Meher Baba's writings is Fana and Baqa. A real basic definition of these two terms. Let's see if I can. This is Baba really referred to these from the 1920s right on through to the 50s. So they apparently mattered to him. It's a funny way to put it, but they were things he really wanted to talk about. And let's see. No, this isn't it. So here's a basic preliminary definition of these things. Oops, things that he gives. And it's hard to see. So Fana, this is where he starts to talk about in God Speaks. No, already. Oh, this is the previous page. Sorry. Oh, I didn't copy that page. Darn it. Okay. Well, anyway, Fana means annihilation, an annihilation. And Baqa means an abiding in. So the relationship between them is you pass through a Fana, you pass through an annihilation, and enter into a new state, and you abide in it, and that's the new Baqa. Now, I gather that for people traveling the path, these are experiential realities. I would presume so. They certainly talk about it as if it is the case. And here's a little thing from the Everything and the Nothing. Baba didn't call this Fana, but it makes me think of it. Just this first paragraph from Everything and Nothing. At a certain stage of the spiritual journey, there is an experience in which all things to the aspirant's physical eyes gradually fade away, leaving a void, facing which he feels fright or panic. But the next moment, a lotus appears within the void. This experience is not enduring. The lotus disappears and all things begin to reappear. So this is one of the chief experiences of the path, Baba says. But I'm a gross conscious soul, so I don't know. But this description makes me think of like Fana, an annihilation that leads to getting the experiences of a plane, Baqa. It's something like that.
Like alcohol.
You get wiped out in intoxication, and then you wake up at your
Back the way you were.
back the way you were. But on the path, what you awaken to is a new level, apparently. Now highest versions of these things, what these terms really mean are, let's see, 2021. I know this is intense stuff, I know. But, okay.
You get an enormous number of descriptions of this sort of experience in Buddhism as well.
Yes.
Particularly
Do they use that language
intense
more?
there because they're believing in no self,
Yeah.
and therefore to go beyond any sort of experiences and to die to those experiences, to go beyond them is very much a path, part of the path in Tantric Buddhism.
Yeah.
In fact, all Buddhism.
Yes. I wonder what language they use for it. They must have their own language for it.
Emptiness, void.
Sunyata would be emptiness. Yeah.
Yes.
That can become almost a semi-metaphysical term about, well, it's experiential and metaphysical both. That distinction would not be.
Well, they also call this, they don't use the word, but they more or less refer to this as cheap experience too.
Yeah.
As Huinan.
Yeah.
Possible not to be attached to this kind of false emptiness.
Yes. Yes.
But the real emptiness is the borderline.
Yes. Well, here's where Baba, first I'm just showing you the passages. It's in this edition, the third printing. It starts on about page 135. And there are about 15 pages where Fana and Baqa are the major topic or a central topic that Baba is talking about, actually. So God Speaks has a big section on it. So in Sufi terms, Fana means passing away in. Fana has two stages. The first stage of Fana is the conscious experience of the absolute vacuum state. And the second stage, now this, we're not talking now about the real Fana. There is the real Fana, and then there are Fanas while we're still in the illusory sphere leading up to it. But this is the real one with a capital F, you could say. Fana has two stages. The first stage of Fana is the conscious experience of the absolute vacuum state. And the second stage of Fana, or Fana Fila, is the conscious experience of the I and God state. So Fana Fila, how that breaks down is Fana Fi Allah. And Fi means in. So annihilation in God. So the Vedantic terms for these two states, let's see, are Nirvana and Nirvakalpa, or Nirvakalpa. Where is it? Yeah. So Nirvana is of course, Buddha characterized Nirvana as the goal of the path. And Baba said it was his mistake not to have explained that after the achievement of Nirvana, you then experience Nirvakalpa, which Nirvana, Baba said, is the experience of the absolute divine vacuum. And Nirvakalpa is what follows immediately upon Nirvana, and that's the experience of I am God. So in Nirvana, you do not actually experience the I am God state. And Baba said, because God, it's impossible for God not to exist. This is right here in this very section of God Speaks talking about this. Okay, I'll read this. Nirvana is that state where apparently God is not. This is the only state where God is not and consciousness is. It's the only state where that's so. This experience of the first stage of Fana is what Buddha emphasized. But later on, it was misinterpreted as Buddha having emphasized that there was no God. The reality, however, is that God is. But in the absolute vacuum state of the first stage of Fana, only consciousness remains, experiencing absolute vacuum.
Well, do you think it's fair to characterize Nirvana as the end of the journey of experiencing nothing, and you're experiencing nothing is what it is,
Yeah,
in its completeness, which is nothing. That's why
That's
it's sort of empty.
yeah.
And then you move on to experiencing the everything. Like, is that,
Yes, it's
Nothing as nothing.
yeah, nothing as what it
Nothing with
really
a capital N.
is. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
So when he talks about the everything and the nothing, this would be the experience of the nothing. And by the way, Buddhism really was immensely developed in explaining the nothing. Sunyata means that, or sunya, empty, emptiness. Under Mahayana with Nagarjuna and others, that became a very highly developed understanding that they had of the nothing. Probably no other religious tradition has explored that in so much depth, it seems to me.
And when Baba says it was Buddha's mistake, it was more, I mean, it wasn't a real mistake. Buddha knew what he was doing. It was mainly for contingency that he said that.
Well, it seems like if he had not made that mistake, Buddhism would have been a lot different.
Yeah,
It's a pretty fundamental shift in Buddhism.
So it was Buddhism, upaya.
Yes.
Yeah, it is upaya,
Useful
yeah.
means, yeah. But he did say that all the avatars made a mistake, and maybe that's what keeps
I
creation
think Baba
going.
was just being humorous.
Joking? You think he's been joking? You take the no mistake view of it. I take it that he made a mistake. So we can have a meeting on this. This will be another schism we can have.
Maybe this time his mistake was telling us about the mistakes.
He said next time he'll tell us.
He'll tell us.
But if Buddha hadn't done that, the atheist would have nothing to draw on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, so Buddhism is prone to atheism,
Yeah.
actually.
That's not quite
No, it is. No, I mean, I'm not saying that that's true Buddhism, but it has historically given rise to something much like atheism in some of its
Atheist.
branches.
Well, Shankara criticizes it as an atheist.
Yeah, he attacks it that way, yeah.
Again, for, not really. To be reshown.
Okay, no, I'm not attacking real Buddhism.
Shankara was
nothing like
mistaken.
that. Yeah. But now, as it cannot happen for God not to exist, isn't that interesting? As it can never happen for God not to exist, in the state of nirvana, God plays the part of consciousness itself, which consciousness is sometimes termed superconsciousness. Baba uses that term throughout Infinite Intelligence, or Mahachaitanya. The second stage of Fana follows this nirvana state, and the I am God state is experienced consciously. So these are the two stages of Fana. The first is the experience of the nothing, he doesn't call it that here, but of the divine vacuum. And the second is the experience of the everything, or the I am God state.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
They're experienced simultaneously.
Well, here's what he says. I was going to come to that point, actually. But this is the final Fana. This is the actual Fana of God realization. And in the supplement, where is it? Yeah. Here's one of the things I'm doing is just, putting out on the table some of the passages where Baba talks about this topic. And one of them is God Speaks, page 125 to 139 or something like that. And here's another one, which is in the supplement, Fana and Fana Fila. And you'll read a little bit of this. Fana is the state of unconscious consciousness. In Fana Fila, soul is unconscious of everything except self being God. In the 10 states of God, this would be the 8th state of God. Here, let me, I'll just pop that up here. I have it. Because this is all relevant. I don't know how many, some of you would be acquainted with this, the 10 states of God? Or is this kind of...
Intimately.
Intimately. Tony has been, yeah. So here's the first state of God, here's the second, here's Creator, Preserver, Destroyer. So the 8th, this is state 2B, and when the Jivatma attains that experience, God is the divinely absorbed, that's the 8th state of God. So somebody who is in that state, we have a picture of him, cha-cha, the must cha-cha. You can find that in the Wayfarers. So that would be this state of fana fila. So when you're in fana fila, you're utterly oblivious to the universe. You simply are unconscious of it completely. Baba said. Now, where were we? I was back on. Yeah. So that's the 8th state of God, and there we go. Before the soul loses its human state and gains the divine state of nirvakalpa, it has to experience the vacuum state of nirvana. Nirvana is the infinite vacuum state, a state in which the soul is fully conscious of real nothing. Yes, we were just saying that. And if in the state of nirvana the human body is dropped, one passes into a state of the infinite bliss of God. In some cases, nirvana is immediately and inevitably followed by nirvakalpa, or fana fila, where the soul is fully conscious of the real everything. Nirvana and nirvakalpa are so closely linked that each can be said to be the divine goal. False nothing equals false everything. This is lowercase, right? Real nothing equals neither everything nor nothing. Real everything equals God the infinite. Now we could spend a long time on this, but we won't now. False nothing leads to false everything, and real nothing leads to real everything. So the experience of the real nothing would be nirvana, or fana, and the experience of the real everything would be nirvakalpa, or fana fila. False nothing is linked to false everything, and real nothing is linked to real everything. I'm going to just jump ahead. Meher Baba has also made the following points. The real goal is to realize God in human form, but those who drop their bodies before attaining God realization, i.e., those who drop their bodies in the state of nirvana before attaining the state of nirvakalpa, their goal is liberation, mukti, from the cycle of rebirth. They experience infinite bliss only. So you probably heard this, that people, muktas, experience only infinite bliss. The Trinity, knowledge, power, bliss, they experience only infinite bliss. And this apparently is how it happens. If you achieve fana, die, drop your body, then you have the experience of infinite bliss. The individual who attains the nirvakalpa state is retained as infinite and unlimited even after dropping the human body, and there is a continuous experience of I am God. But the one who attains mukti, liberation, experiences I am Anand. I am infinite bliss.
Really not.
And this limits his experience of the unlimited individuality of the I am infinite knowledge, power, knowledge, bliss simultaneously. This is a question that comes up sometimes. People say, is it really true that muktas only experience infinite bliss? And this says so.
I'd settle for that.
We'll settle for
Yeah,
bliss.
good enough.
Yeah.
But in
Luke?
this,
1 for 3?
in the discourses, Baba said they're still there, power and knowledge still there. Acquiesced.
Yeah. Quiz, yeah.
Yes.
Well, he says this,
Quiz.
infinite knowledge is the most important aspect of the triune nature of God when an individual realizes God in human form. I mean, that kind of makes sense, right? If you're in the human form, the knowledge, because that's what relates you to the universe. Infinite bliss remains the most important aspect of one's experience. When one has dropped one's body in the state of nirvana and attains mukti, liberation as the goal. And a majube kamel, that would be a majub or a brahmi bhut is the Vedantic term. Chacha would be an example of it. We have those photos of him. Experiences infinite knowledge, power, bliss simultaneously. And when he comes down to normal consciousness, i.e., when he is also duality conscious, and no more in the state of the Mojube Kamo, he not only experiences knowledge, power, bliss, but uses them while having his human body. Okay, so now this begins to move us on from Fana to Baqa. Okay, so Fana is the vacuum equivalent to Nirvana. Fana Fila is the second stage of Fana, as Baba explains it here, and that's the I am God state, or Nirvikalpa Samadhi. That's how he explained it in God Speaks. He had used these terms differently earlier on, and if you read Ramju Abdullah's book, as I'll be mentioning in a minute, Baba he uses the terms in a different way than this. Yeah, is this all making sense?
Yep.
So,
Bob also said the avatar mostly uses knowledge while
Yeah.
he's working here.
yeah,
Beyond knowledge.
yeah. Now, Baqa is, Baba uses that to refer to the experience, the creation experience. All right, the Baqa Bila would be the relevant term. Baqa, B-A-Q-A, and then B-I-L-L-A-H. And that's Baqa bi Allah. Baqa means abiding, and bi, I think, means with, and Allah, abiding with God. And what Baba brought that term to mean, it was different in Ramju's rendering of his earlier explanations, is the experience of creation that you have after the I am God state. So this would be pertinent to people, in the 10 states of God. The 9th state of God, this is Fana Fila, but the 9th and 10th states of God are the 10th state of God is a Sadguru, or perfect master, and also the avatar. They both occupy this station, this office. And the 9th state of God is the state of one who is conscious of creation but doesn't have any duty there. This is Jivan Mukta would be an example of this. So Erich actually met one or two of these, as I recall. And the stupid movie Being There always comes to mind. Chauncey Gardner, some of you may have seen that movie 30 years ago, who he said, I like to watch. So Jivan Mukta is like a Chauncey Gardner. He likes to watch, but doesn't have to do anything. That's the idea. So there's a school of opinion that thinks this is the best of it. If you want to be a Majub or a Jivan Mukta or a Sadguru, if you want to be a Sadguru, that's for the workaholics. If you want to be a Majub, that's for people who just want out. They've had enough. But if you kind of like to watch but not to have to do anything, this is for you, the 9th state of God.
Duty to one's soul.
Yeah, Jivan Mukta gives realization to one's soul. And actually there's another type here called the Paramhansa. Paramahansa Yogananda was actually, Baba said, not a Paramahansa, but a Sadguru or a Kutuk. But a Paramahansa is sometimes conscious of creation and sometimes not. If you go tune in and out, Baba said. But both of these, both the 9th and 10th states of God, are in the state of Baqa Bila, actually. That is, they're conscious of the I am God state, but they're also conscious of creation simultaneously. And Baba gave, let's see, where is it? Gee, I didn't say this properly. Yeah, okay. This is the 4 journeys. We won't spend a lot of time on this, but Baba presented this at the East-West gathering. Actually, Francis Brabazon was the one who held the pointer and pointed to places on this chart, as Baba explained it. And so the first journey is the journey up to the passing away into God, which is here, which is Fana or Fana Fila. And the second journey would be to Baqa Bila, and that's to the state of a Jivan Mukta. The third journey is from Baqa Bila to the office of a Sadguru, who is both experiences creation and has a duty therein. And the fourth is after the Sadguru drops the body, it goes back to Fana Fila and passes away. Those are the 4 journeys, and quick.
So, for instance, does a perfect master necessarily take those in between stations on the way to being a perfect master? Do you think? Does Baba say that?
I don't know if Baba really explained it. I would presume so, but I don't know. I mean, it seems that I would guess that Baba, those 9 years between the kiss from Babajan and Maharaj saying you are the avatar, I would guess that that was the time that was taken both to return to creation consciousness and take up duty. But how exactly that's done is, does anybody know? Did Baba Tian or Baba ever explain that? The differentiation between coming back to creation consciousness and taking up a duty therein.
Well, when one perfect master dies,
Yeah.
those God-realized souls, Jivan Muktas, is filling his post. Obviously, we have to.
Well, maybe it's a job. Maybe it's a lot of work. I don't know. I don't know where Baba ever.
Well,
I mean,
but when you pass into Godhood, you have to go through Nirvana and then Navikalpa. That's the state for.
yeah. Well, that has to be done. That has to
for
be
my
done.
troops and Jivan Muktas. So in
Yeah.
that sense, everyone has to pass.
Yeah,
But the avatar is a different case, isn't it? With perfect master. It's God becoming man.
yeah.
Perfect master is man becoming God.
So how that relates to going through the 4 journeys is something that I don't know. But, this,
Well,
yeah.
sorry.
Yeah.
I was going to ask, where does the Bodhisattva in Buddhism sit on the plane, do you think?
Well, it's a little hard to, the word gets used so variously within Buddhism that one would have to be a real expert in Buddhism to really know. Sometimes it sounds like they're talking about perfect masters, but the definition of a bodhisattva given, at least in early Buddhism, is this. It's one who renounces nirvana until every other soul in creation gets nirvana first.
Which in Baba's cosmology doesn't really make sense. Because
Yeah.
it doesn't, according to Baba, it doesn't finish.
Oh,
It
so,
The
does.
concept
so-
doesn't
well-
quite fit in.
Because in 6th plan.
Baba did say in
Yeah, but
Infinity,
for
he
everyone
does
else,
characterize the peer that way. But I would presume that this is the resolution of the bodhisattva. It may not be what actually happens.
Exactly.
At some point you probably get overwhelmed, and even though you're going to wait till every other soul in creation, you just get carried away from the ocean comes and you're annihilated.
Yeah,
Eric
You realise
described
it's gonna take a
that
while.
6th plane experiences. It's like a ripe fruit, and
Yeah.
unfortunately, he said, at some point the fruit gets so ripe it just drops off.
Just drops.
Mm.
So the bodhisattva gets nirvana despite his noble resolution,
Yeah.
I guess.
Or because of.
Yeah, well, that's probably, I mean, I would guess that that resolution is itself the renunciation of that desire, which you do have to renounce before you can get it. But sometimes the term bodhisattva gets used in ways that seem to designate someone who's realized too. So, I mean, Buddhism is so enormous, and there's so many schools of it.
But it also referred to Guanyin or the Tibetan called Chenrezig. They also called bodhisattvas.
Yeah,
It seems they are embodied as well as unembodied.
yeah, yeah.
Two types.
Yeah. Now so this is the fundamental, Kendra. We just finished Fana, Fila, and Baqa, Bila. So we're all there
Right.
now.
Come
We've all
along.
finished the second journey. Yeah. But now this is not the end of the topic in Baba's usage. This will be the real meaning of those terms, the real Fana Fila, and the real Baqa Bila. Oh, but I just wanted to say, I'm not enough of an expert on these topics, but I do make an effort to read, and so in it. So one of the classic treatments that actually gets referenced in the supplement to God Speaks Numbers 20 and 21 deal with these topics. Fana and Fana, and the next is Baqa and Fana and Baqa. Those are discussions of this there. It's another place to go. But this is a book that you have in the library. I just scanned it the other day, and then Jeff gave me a download of the whole book. It's by a master called Hujwiri, Hujwiri. You'll see him referenced by Francis, of course, in Stay with God. And he was one of the very great Sufi masters. I don't know if he was a perfect master. He sounds like he probably was.
What era?
He would have been about the 11th century, 10th, 11th century. And his book is the Kashf al-Majub. It's one of the great classics. Actually, some of you may know Karl Ernst. He's a Baba lover. He's a scholar of Islamic philosophy and Sufism at Chapel Hill. He's one of the world famous scholars right now on this. And he wrote the new introduction to the translation of it that you have here by Nicholson. So this is one of the great classics. And this passage on the Karazis deals with Fana and Baqa, as a matter of fact. I was trying to read it and I was rather puzzled by it. I need some help in really understanding it. But another great classic treatment is this one, another author of the same period, Kushairi, who wrote a treatise on a lot of the, if ever you get into Sufism and a lot of those terms like drunkenness and sobriety or state and station, hal and muquam, these sorts of things. This is one of the most eloquent treatments of it. It's only about 30 or 40 pages. In fact, I have it scanned. And so he treats passing away, Fana. I guess I should be saying Baqa, shouldn't I? Does anybody know the proper pronunciation of these words? Fana, Baqa.
Most of these languages are
Ward Parks knows them.
I wish I did.
I mean, Sanskrit's all even, so what about Arabic? Is it?
I don't know.
I mean, even stresses.
Yeah, well, the it gets a macron over it. So, and then there's this apostrophe, which probably
But
Arabic.
with the QBFA.
Huh?
Is with the QBFA. Baqa.
Baqa. It's probably a back sound, I know. And then it's always a question of whether you say it in Arabic style or Persian style, since they're completely different from each other.
It's complex.
In the earlier books, it's Baka.
Yeah.
And then whether
Later,
it's
Baq.
Southern Persian,
Yeah, Southern Persian.
like
In the
Yeah.
20th.
Masha,
And then there's Parsi.
Yeah, that's right. The different schools of Sufism would probably disagree. And then you've got the damn Urdu language that grabbed the same words and brought them into India.
yeah.
So if you want correct pronunciation, you'll have to go to someone other than me. But this is it's about 2 pages on Fana and Baqa. It's very dense. I'll just read a little bit, okay, well this is kind of, I don't know if this sort of thing interests you or not, but he says, know that the servant means the lover of God, is characterized by these 3 things: acts, afal, character traits, akhlaq, and states, awal. This is awali is actually related to that. Anyway, I think this is interesting. 3 things: acts, character traits, and states. There's an analysis of what the human person is composed of. And all of these, with all of respect to all of these, there's a Fana and a Baqa. You annihilate a trait, and a new trait comes into existence, like you annihilate the trait, I'm making this up, of greed. And the new trait of generosity is the Baqa that follows that Fana. That seems to be how they would talk about this sometimes. And here he says, this is an analysis of these things. A people wanders lost in the wasteland. A people wanders lost in the plain of love. They passed away, then passed away again. They abided in abiding of nearness to their Lord. You can see there's quite a culture of meditation and immersion in these topics, to produce a poem like that. The first passing away is the passing away of the self and its attributes to endure to the attributes of the real. Right? That makes sense. The false self passes away. But Islam would have the attributes in Islam are the names of God. Those would be 99 names of God are among the attributes of God. So your false, like one of the attributes, the second name of God is the merciful, Al-Brahman. So your false attributes pass away, and that attribute takes its place. Then there is the passing away from the attributes of the real through the witnessing of the real. Then there is a person's passing away from witnessing his own passing away through perishing in the ecstatic existentiality, wujud, that's a big word, of the real. So I guess you even cease witnessing and simply are lost in the ecstasy of the very being of God, something like that. He seems to be talking about a very high order of experience, so far as I can see.
Fana and Baqa.
Yeah, that, well maybe, although maybe the witnessing of the real, is that Fana, or is that six-plane seeing of it? I don't know. So you can see that they're really coming up with the language for talking about mystical experience, which I dare say a lot of them are having,
Yeah. Quite, speaking poetically for a moment, but it's quite beautiful, isn't it, to think that every moment is creation, preservation and destruction going on.
Yeah.
Totally within a time-bound compass. But the way of vanquishing time also consists of consciousness mastering creation and destruction and sort of transcending it in a way.
Yeah.
Sort of kaleidoscopic view of what's going on.
Yeah.
The separation forms into unity and then
Yeah.
separates again. And perspectives shift in different directions.
Yeah. Well, it would be fun sometime to study some of this Sufi language is very provocative, like drunkenness and sobriety, those two. And there's the famous case of Junaid, the great perfect master, who was an advocate of the path of sobriety. He didn't like the intoxicated types, one of whom showed up at his doorstep, Al-Hallaj, who was extremely intoxicated, and Junaid would not accept him as a disciple, actually, even though Al-Hallaj went on to become a perfect master too. So there you see, I mean, that would be something relevant to the experience of seekers of God, moments of intoxication and moments of sobriety, and the path of intoxication and the path of sobriety. I mean, I would think of Erich as very much a kind of a advocate of the sobriety path. Not much, he wouldn't give much scope for drunkenness.
And Bao might be
The intoxicated side.
the
Yeah.
More like Alaba.
Alaba, yeah, that's true. Alaba would very much be. Yeah. So now I'll just show you this. This is an early treatment of the same topic. This is a book that people don't know very well, but you have it in your library. This is Ramju Abdullah's rendering of Baba's early discourses. Sri Meher Baba, his philosophy and teachings. And it's really quite an important book, even though people don't, it's kind of disappeared from view. But here he talks about it.
Ramju's son Ali, who is still alive in his 90s, he said this is a simplified version of God's speech.
Yeah.
This is the only one he reads.
Yeah. No, Ramju was one of Baba's great disciples. We sort of lost sight of a lot of these people because we never met them. They went and died too early.
How inconsiderate of them.
Very selfish.
Very
Very selfish of them. And let's throw Francis in that list. I mean, I wanted to meet the guy. First of all, he was selfishly lived in Australia, which is the other end of the world, so I could never see him here. And then he selfishly went and died in 1984 or whatever it was. So, okay, I'm going to read this just because it's a nice description of these terms. Fana means complete annihilation. But annihilation of what? Before replying to this question, let us see what the spiritual pilgrim himself is. A human being is the real self plus consciousness plus sanskaras plus ego plus mind. This is actually very Vedantic, as a matter of fact, the different constituents of the false self. We shall leave aside the real self of the present, as in reality, the ego is nothing but the perverted manifestation of the real self. Now, Fana means the complete annihilation of all sanskaras. Amal equals mental impressions of actions, desires, and tendencies bound with egoism, ego, and mind, with the exception of consciousness. Now that makes sense, right? Fana would be the annihilation of sanskaras and its whole tie-ins with mind, egoism, all this sort of stuff. But Fana does not mean the annihilation of consciousness. Right?
Sorry.
The real Fana. He's talking about the real Fana. Now, the Fana that we have does mean the annihilation of consciousness. That's the difference between our Fana and the real one. It's the only difference, actually.
Later, Baba just used a much simpler thing. He said, if sanskaras must go, consciousness remain.
Yeah. Yeah. So this would, Fana would be a term for the sanskaras must go part.
What's the title of this book?
Sri Mihr Baba, His Philosophy and Teachings, published in 1933. We need to republish it.
Is it on our trust website? Yeah?
I don't know. I don't know. I scanned it last year when I was
It's just
here.
a small book, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. It's small, but it's really important.
No, yeah, but I mean,
It's a short one,
Copy
yeah.
in the archive.
Yeah.
Jim collected.
I have scans of it. Maybe I should leave it here. You know, I scanned it good because of its importance. The consciousness remains after Fana, but consciousness of what? Of nothing. And who is conscious? None. No one. This is a real good description of Nirvana. Yet this conscious nothingness, or spiritual vacuum, is there because there is no ego, there is no I am nothing, but simply nothingness, neither God nor the universe, neither the creator nor the creation. Yet this nothingness is not unconsciousness, but unconscious consciousness. That term came up, we read it in the supplement to God Speaks a minute ago, if we can say so. And it is difficult to grasp the situation merely through the medium of the intellect. The consciousness of the state of Fana is neither gross nor subtle, neither false nor real, neither of the world nor of God, but it is there, just as water is, though it is devoid of any color. This is really a marvelous description of it, I think. It's really quite... and it is because of the consciousness remains after the annihilation of the samskaras, false ego, etc. I won't read all through it, even though it's very interesting.
Do you think it's fair to say that's like pure sat?
No,
Like there's
Nirvana is the best description of Nirvana.
It's not the sat. The sat would be the existence of God, and when you experience that, you're
No, it's not the
actually...
existence of God, it's pure existence in, there's just a concept almost.
No.
Yeah,
That's
but
what
that would
is.
be...
There's just not even someone, but there's just there-ness,
More
if you know what I
outside.
mean.
More like asat.
Yeah, but it's sat
Non-existent.
aware of asat, if you know what I mean. It's like pure there-ness, aware of not
No,
there-ness.
that's a description of Nirvana.
Oh yeah, I know that it's a description of Nirvana. I'm just saying that you can come at it a different way.
No, Satchidanand, we have the Godhood, so it's different.
I would think that would be the I am God experience of the Majub, to experience Sat. But I will say this too. Here he comes to Baqa. In this book, Baqa means the I am God state. But later on, Baba used Fana Phila for this instead, not Baqa. I'm just warning you that the terms shift. Here's another case in the 6th edition, in the discourses, the 5-volume set, and in the 6th edition, Nirvana is used to designate the I am God state. So so you're going to find some difference in the way these terms are used. It seems that the final formulation of it is the one in God Speaks, where he really explained Nirvana versus Nirvakal, Fana versus Fana. Just a little warning, because this could be confusing if you read these different books on the subject. But now there's so this is one of the classic books, actually, Ramju Abdullah. By the way, he was the one who had a lot to do with Baba's book, the caretaking of it. He was also the one who really got the trust deed, Avatar Mir Baba trust deed, written up. He was really quite a major player in Baba's life.
I wonder if he checked it out.
She just read through a bit of it. That's why he selfishly went and died before we could ask him that. I know.
I have a little episode about
Ramju?
He, 2 days before he died, he was telling people around him, he said, I can tell you now, Meher Baba is the personification of light.
Of light.
Of light. And his son, Ali, told me last time in India, Baba's telegram arrived just before he died. The telegram said, Ramju, my dear Ramju has come to me.
Wow. Great disciple. I was thinking when Joanna passed away a week back, she suffered from asthma her whole life long. Poor Ramju did too. He always had terrible breathing problems. Baba would talk about it sometimes. These great figures among the Mandali, and we sort of forgotten about them. Now here's, we've been talking about the real Fana and the real Baqa, but I don't know if Baba uses the term actually more broadly than that to refer also to Fana and Baqa of creatures in creation. We were talking about the God-realized ones with the real Fana and Baqa, but there are actually 3 forms of it, and I'm just going to read from the glossary where this is explained clearly. Fana Baqa may refer to one of the 3 types of annihilation abiding. Annihilation is Fana, right, and abiding is Baqa. Of annihilation abiding experiences between which parallels may be drawn. 1. The going to sleep and the reawakening each day of the ordinary human. 2. The annihilation, Fana, of some aspect of the false self, which precedes the entering each plane of the path and living the life, Baqa, of that plane. And 3. The real Fanafila of the Majube Kamil and the Baqa Bila of the Jivan Mukta and Sadguru. Okay, we talked about this last one, right? The real Fanafila and the real Baqa Bila. But there are 2 other types. And this is the first of these. He characterizes as the rudimentary Fanafila, Fana Baqa. Let me see where I am here. This rudimentary type is common to every soul in creation, all the way up through evolution, and to human beings who are in the reincarnationary stage of the divine theme. What this means is people prior to entering the path. So, unless I don't want to offend those of you who may be on the path, but for the rest of us, we would all be of the rudimentary type. I don't know, any people on the subtler mental planes here who...
We're not saying.
You're not saying. You'll just be offended silently.
That's right.
Okay. So what this refers to is going to sleep at night and waking up. So going to sleep is Fana, and waking up in the morning is Baqa. So this we actually experience on a daily basis. And now it seems, this is where I would really like to get, the knowledge of someone who really knows about Sufism. But here Baba is bringing to the idea of Fana and Baqa, the Sufi ideas, the trinity of sound, sleep, dream, wakefulness, which is a fundamental, I talked about it in the God Speaks weekends we had, and that's a real basic triad in Vedanta: sound, sleep, dream, and wakefulness. I'll come into that, talk about it more a little later on. So that he's connecting these two traditions. Does anybody else know anything more about this? I mean, it seems to me Baba is linking Vedanta with Sufism here. Because I've never seen where Sufism associated going to sleep with Fana, but Baba does. And it's common to all creatures, like dogs and plants.
There was something I read the other day that some scientist somewhere was saying that plants do sleep. They actually measured their branches. I mean, this is going to sound stupid, but the branch is actually getting lower at night. And then when the sun comes up, they lift them back up. And they equated it, like they literally equated it with an early form of sleep.
Of sleep? Wow.
There's a lot of that research that's gone on to highlight how conscious the vegetation is.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
I think they do their growing at night.
Yeah.
Or maybe we do too.
And the perception,
Maybe we do too.
they have a perception
Babies
of
grow when they are asleep.
Oh, there you go, yes.
the perception of their surroundings is high, much greater than we ever give credit for.
And the level of communication.
Yeah, and you know, scientifically they've identified and proven these things. It's not just speculation.
Well, now in Infinite Intelligence, when Baba goes through a discussion of the cycle of sound, sleep, dream, wakefulness in Series 10, he goes through the daily cycle for the typical human being and the typical stone, actually. So, I mean, I infer from this that stones sleep and wake up also. So apparently it applies even to them. So this rudimentary Fana Baqa cycle that we all go through, we share not only with other gross conscious people, and not only with dogs and kangaroos and kookaburras and tomatoes, but even with stones. That's all the same type. That's the first type. The second type, Baba said, is the Fana Baqa of people on the plains, and the third is the real Fana Baqa. Now, here is where one of the, seems to me a real puzzle comes up. And okay, let me go first to, here's another discussion of this topic we'll find in Baba's literature, and this is in Discourses. Baba talks about it here. And the discourse is entitled The Stages of the Path. So if you want to, it's a very short, nice treatment of it. So when an aspirant enters into a new plane, he is gradually merged into it. That would be the Baqa, right? And along with the lowering down of mental activity, he experiences a substantial diminution of the ego life. That would be the Fana part of it. This curtailment of the ego life is different from the final annihilation of the ego, which is the Fana with a capital F, which takes place at the seventh plane. But like the final annihilation of the seventh plane, the different stages of the curtailment of the ego, the intermediate six planes, deserve special mention, owing to their relative importance. In Sufi parlance, the final annihilation of the ego is described as Fana Fila, and the earlier samadhi of the six planes of duality have also been recognized as kinds of Fana, since they also involve a partial annihilation of the ego. So what it sounds like is on the planes, but this is it seems to me contradicted elsewhere, but presentation here, the Fana would be a partial annihilation of the ego. Now, he doesn't really, okay, I'll read a little bit more. Through all these Fanas of ascending order, there is a continuity of progression towards the final Fana Fila, And each has some special characteristic. This is sounding like what the Sufis talk about, the annihilation of one attribute and its replacement by another. The annihilation of one state or hal and its replacement by another. When the pilgrim enters at the first plane, he experiences his first fana, or minor annihilation of the ego. The pilgrim is temporarily lost to his limited individuality and experiences bliss. He's not talking about Baqa here, but I think probably the bliss would be the Baqa, goes with that fana. Many pilgrims thus merged think that they have realized God, and hence get stuck in the first plane. If the pilgrim keeps himself free from self-delusion or comes to realize that his attainment is really a transitional phase in his journey, he advances further on the spiritual path and arrives on the second plane. The merging into the second plane is called the Fana and Baqa, or the annihilation of the false. The pilgrim is now absorbed in bliss and infinite light. That sounds like Baqa, doesn't it? He's not using the word Baqa, but I think that's what it is. So the annihilation would be the annihilation of the prior experience. That's why when you go to the second plane, you lose the experience of the first plane. Some think that they have attained the goal and get stranded on the second plane, but others who keep themselves free from self-delusion march onwards and enter the third plane. The merging into the third plane is called the Fana e Zahiri. Zahiri means the external, or the annihilation of the apparent. Here, the pilgrim loses all consciousness of the body or the world for days and experiences infinite power. Since he has no consciousness of the world, he has no occasion for the expression of this power. This is Vidya Samadhi, or the state of divine coma. This is that, it's also called a hairad. It's a state of enchantment on the third plane. Muhammad the Must was caught there before Baba came into his contact. He was caught in the third plane, etc. So he goes on talking about, I won't read it all, but it's all very interesting. So it would appear that when you enter into a new plane, there's a fana, annihilation of what the experience before was, and a new baqa as you become absorbed into the new stage or new plane. So this sounds like it's the second type of Fana Baqa. The first being going to sleep and waking up, and the second being this. But now here is a puzzle, and I'm just presenting this because he talks about all of this. Let me see where this is. Yeah, okay. Here he's talking about the three types of Fana Baqa. Nevertheless, three fundamental types of Fana Baqa include all the individualized experiences of Fana Baqa. The first of the three fundamental types is the rudimentary. This type is the Fana Baqa of the phenomenal false life in illusion experienced by all who, daily passing away in Fana, gain Baqa, to abide in illusion every day. This rudimentary Fana Baqa of the ordinary phenomenal life is composed of the sound sleep state and the ordinary awake state. Okay, we were already talking about that, right? Then he goes to the Fana Baqa of people on the plains, and here's what I find puzzling. There are about 3 or 4 pages here, and I've read it through many, many times. And it's very hard to puzzle it out, but it sounds like he's actually talking about going to sleep and waking up on the plains in the same way that we do in the ordinary state. But that's rather different, isn't it, from the annihilation of a prior state and the awakening into a new state, or a movement from one plane to another. It seems like a rather different characterization. Are you following the point I'm making?
Can we read a bit?
Well, it would be really, we'd have to spend like a whole hour and a half reading it because it's quite difficult. But it sounds like when the Fana Baqa of the plains that he's talking about is somebody on the plains going to sleep and waking up.
Could be, I haven't read this for long, could refer to the yogic path Baba talking about. When you were
I
going
think
to
he's talking about.
samadhi,
I think he's talking about everybody on the plains.
I don't know.
I think
When they
so.
go into samadhi, they get absorbed in the bliss and light. Then that's kind of Fana or Baqa. Then they come out.
Yeah.
To,
But
to
what I'm saying is the wordings of it make it sound, I won't take the time to read through these passages, but the actual wording of it sounds like he's talking about pilgrims on the path going to sleep in the same way that we do, and waking up in the
Which
same way.
number? Supplement? I don't know.
But the page number is going to be different on that.
Which supplement?
I'll just say this because we would have to spend quite a long time reading these passages. So there are two different concepts. One is that the Fana Baqa would be an annihilation of a prior state, would be the Fana, and the Baqa would be the abiding in a new state. And the second is people on the plains just going to sleep and waking up, and they wake up on the plains. And that second of those sounds like what he's talking about. The wording of it suggests that. I put this problem out to you all because it's a real...
Well, maybe on the plains there's less unconsciousness during sleep. But it's more, and maybe it's more like vacuum.
Yes.
Some unconsciousness.
It could be. And I actually have a suggestion about this I'm going to put forward because I think... But let me give you one analogy that Baba does present here, which is about the difference. Okay, the difference between the Fana Baqa of the man who enters the plains of the path and the man who is not on the plains. So this would be the rudimentary type 1, and this would be the second type, right? Is that the farmer, that would be the pilgrim of the path, can be likened to a man who, after living for many years on a certain place, severs all of his past connections and sets out on a world tour, traveling from one place to another, crossing continents one after another. Although this man would be daily going to sleep and awakening the next day, as he was accustomed to sleeping and awakening every day in his first habitat, yet now, in the course of his world tour, he would be passing away in sound sleep and would be daily waking up, evidently with the predominant impressions of his completely changed environments and novel experiences. Okay, this takes a lot of puzzling on, but this is part of how I've come to understand it. From stone consciousness all the way up through ordinary human consciousness, we're always experiencing the gross sphere. That's the locus. Stone consciousness is the consciousness is not full. In evolution, you're getting more and more consciousness of it. But what are you getting consciousness of? You're getting consciousness of the gross sphere. And throughout the cycle of 8,400,000 lifetimes in reincarnation, you're having consciousness of the gross sphere. That doesn't change through all that time. But when you go through the planes, you're actually moving in what you're actually, in the sphere that you're experiencing, and that hasn't happened before. So the Fana and Baqa involves going to sleep and waking up to a new landscape, to a new fundamental domain. Something like that is happening.
I wonder if that happens in a tiny sense in the rudimentary Fana Baqa as well. Like
Well,
as you go to sleep, you grow spiritually.
Yeah.
Perhaps each day, very, I'm hoping.
Well, there is progress to be
Yeah.
sure, but what does not progress is that you're always in the gross sphere. Until you enter, I mean, I'm trying to rationalize Baba's distinction between these three types. Whereas in the subtle sphere and in the mental sphere, you're actually moving to a very different scenery, to a whole different type of universe. Something like that.
Here, sleep and awake mean more like he become asleep to gross consciousness. and awake to, for example, first subtle plane. Then he goes to sleep to the first subtle plane and awake to the second, rather than a daily sleep that.
Well, you see, that's what I would like to believe.
Yeah.
But when I keep reading this, it keeps often sounding like going to sleep in the sense of unconsciousness and waking up in the sense of consciousness.
On the plane.
On the planes. But I don't know. I'm just putting this out there. I would prefer it to be what you say. But it doesn't, the wordings of it. But okay, since our time is running short, let me come to something that I think is very revelatory about all of this, seems to me. And that would be, do I have the slideshow open? Let me see if I do. Did I open this one? Yeah, here it is. Okay, this is some of what Baba said about wakefulness, dream, and sound sleep. And as I'm saying, it seems to me that one of Baba's contributions to this topic of Fana Baqa was bringing the Vedantic trinity of sound, sleep, dream, wakefulness into direct relation with Fana and Baqa. I'm not aware that that ever happened within Sufism, although, as I say, I'm not a master of the topic, but I certainly don't see anything like that talked about in what I've seen. And but Baba does, he clearly does, as you've just seen. Fana, for the rudimentary type, is exactly going to sleep. Now, here, in God's hand, this is, you know that, here I brought it, it's this book that was published a few years ago. It's 1925, Baba's own handwriting. And he gave this diagram, and this diagram of Baba's, he kept presenting for 30 years in different forms. So apparently this too was an important idea for him. I mean, something he wanted to understand. Here, the bottom is ordinary awake state, ordinary dream state, ordinary sound sleep, divine dream, and divine awakening. Okay, divine dream is the planes of consciousness, and that's where you're dreaming in full wakefulness. This is dreaming, a subconscious dreaming, and this is dreaming in full awakeness. This is the planes. And God realization means to be sound asleep while being wide awake at the same time. That's all it needs. We experience both of these states on a daily basis, right? We're wide awake now, and then nighttime we go into sound sleep. If we could just bring those two together, we would be God realized. We've fractured and fragmented the wholeness of these three states. They call it Turiya Avastha in Vedanta, where you know, the transcendent state like that. But here's when I first saw this, and I've been puzzling on this for 15 or 20 years, isn't it interesting that sound sleep is put in the middle, right? Why is that? And let me explain the problem by showing another slide. This is one that I just came up with to express it. Let's take the divine theme, right? The journey of the soul. The whole journey of the soul can be characterized in terms of these three states, or 5 states. 3 becomes 5. The original state is like sound sleep before the creation of the universe. Then the whim comes, who am I? And there's the long journey of evolution, right? And that's a dream. Baba has said it's like a divine dream. And you're gradually becoming more and more conscious. But when you achieve human form and start the cycle of reincarnation, you're wide awake, right? So sound sleep, dream, wakefulness. And then in our human form, we do a daily cycle of going around and around and around. Every day we do all 3 of these, okay? When you start to advance spiritually, you go through dream, a divine dream. That is, you experience dream in full wakefulness. I hope this is registering, because Infinite Intelligence talks about this a lot. It's one of its big themes. Wakeful dreaming is the experience of the planes. And when you come to God realization, you're in wakeful sound sleep. So here it's from sound sleep, dream, wakefulness, divine dream, wakeful dreaming, and wakeful sound sleep. wakefulness is the central state, right? In a way, that's what makes most sense. We're coming from dream to wakefulness and then carrying that wakefulness on to sound sleep again. And when you bring sound sleep and wakefulness together, you've got God realization. Are you getting this point? In other words, to have wakefulness in the middle seems most to make sense to me.
Because we eventually, in human form, we're awake but to the gross world.
Yes, that's right. It's a false wakefulness. So you have to fall asleep to the gross world and wake up to the divine reality of things. So then, but then why did Baba keep, and he kept coming back to this idea where he puts ordinary sound sleep in the middle. And there's, I feel, a very deep reason for this. But let me show you some of the other. Eric Nadel was aware of this. He first mentioned it, in fact. This is an infinite intelligence. I won't try to go into it too much, but this is, oh no, this is something different, sorry. This is actually the other pattern. Fiddlesticks, don't I have it? Here, I really need to show, oh yeah, here it is. Yeah, we found this while we were working on infinite intelligence. And this is on the back side of a telegram dated 11th January 1954. Isn't that cool? We are able to precisely date it because around Baba they never wasted a piece of paper. And this is Erich's handwriting. Look at this. False awakening, false dream, sound sleep, real dream, real awakening. Right? It is exactly Baba's diagram done by Erich. This is the same series, right?
Yeah.
You see that? This is the very same series. This is 1925, and this is 1954, January 11th. You know the very date. Now, I would rate the chance of Erich Jesawala just having drawn this up as some thought that he was having, something he was interested in. I would rate the likelihood as exactly 0%. Clearly, Baba gave this to him.
Yeah.
And so Baba was bringing the same idea up again. And now take a look at this. Oops. This chart when God speaks. Here. I'll try to expand it a little bit. Here you have Atma's ordinary awake state, Atma's ordinary dream state, Atma's unconscious sound sleep state, right? Atma's divine dream state, and Atma's divine awake state. The same 5 categories exactly, right? You see that? So I think that that note of Erich's was a first draft of what became this chart, actually. So here he is in God Speaks presenting the same idea. And once again, he wants to put sound sleep in the middle. There's a lot more I could say about this. I'm just doing this in brief. So why is this? And this is what I have come to feel about this. That we could read the text of In God's Hand and it would be illuminating about this. But it's as if when you enter, this is our daily cycle, right? Ordinary sound sleep, ordinary dream, ordinary awake state, ordinary dream, ordinary sound sleep. We do this every day. We've done it millions and millions of times over our many lifetimes. But when you enter into the planes, it's as if instead of going down into the cycle again, you go up. So the reason is this is like a fana. You keep, when you're in the rudimentary type, you keep doing this. But when you enter into the planes, there's a fundamental reorientation where you start cycling this way instead. And the contact is through fana. You go through the fana, but you have a baqa of the higher rather than a baqa of the lower. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that would explain the difference between, or give a diagram for the difference between the rudimentary Fana Baqa and the Fana Baqa of the planes.
It also fits with where Baba says, talking about entering the planes as changing the direction you're facing. Like
That's right. You
that
turn.
sort of turn.
You turn, and the turning point is the ordinary sound sleep state, because it's fana. You need an annihilation. But instead of, after the annihilation, coming back into this damn gross world with all its problems, you enter into the damn subtle world with all its
Yeah.
You move.
Yeah.
You move.
Yeah.
And it's the first time you have ever moved in all your billions of years.
Yeah.
Right?
But it's more metaphorical than literal, isn't it? It not doesn't mean you go to sleep at night, you wake up to a higher state
Yeah.
of consciousness.
Right, Baba, this
Yeah.
is just a way of describing it, and Baba makes that point, even in God's Hand he does. But he actually says, gives an analogy in all of this and in God's Hand. He says, like somebody going to sleep, there's a pull, the dream state, he said, is a mix of the awake state and the sound sleep state. It's a mixture. And if the attraction of the awake state is greater, you linger longer in the dream state before going to sound sleep. You know, if you have, and so because the awake state preponderates. But if the attraction of the sound sleep state is greater, you go through the dream state quickly and don't dream for long. And similarly, when you're coming out of it, if you're the attraction of the sounds, okay, but all right, here's then what he says. His analogy with a pilgrim on the path, he makes this analogy explicit. For a yogi, if the attraction of the gross world, the world, is greater than the attraction of God, he gets stuck on the planes. People stuck in the Hairat of the third plane, for example, are people where the pull of the world is greater. And you can see why that would be, because you're, you know, you like powers, or you're enchanted
So in uh,
by...
this case, the pull of the subtle world.
The world, the pull of the lower, the pull of the lower holds you there. And he makes explicit the analogy between that and our cycle. So that seems to me to be confirming that it's the same basic process happening, but now you've passed through sound sleep, through fana, and come out on the other side of it, where the inner worlds awaken. So if you really want to make spiritual progress, just sleep a lot.
Yeah. I seem to remember Francis saying something about, I read a while ago, that he said something about when your sanskara's thin, you automatically go to
He did.
other, you know.
He got that from Baba.
Okay, yeah.
Well, in this sense, attraction is really samskaras, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. It would be the sanskaras,
Yeah.
And what the attraction of sound sleep would be, would I guess be not sanskaras, but the original whim and the longing for God himself.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's an account of the three different Fana Baqas.
It's also ordinary sound sleep.
Yes.
This transition. It's not a special kind of sound sleep.
Yes.
Baba really writes down it's ordinary.
And here's a very interesting thing. I could give you about 8 or 9 of these if we had the time. He calls ordinary awake state false. He calls the ordinary dream state false. He calls the divine dream real. It's on the real side of the equation. That's on the planes. He calls the divine awakening, God realization, real. And he doesn't characterize this middle state in any way at all. That's
like
true.
It's a transitional state.
Yeah, it's both. You can't really characterize it. So notice that happens here too.
Yeah, it doesn't. It's got a shorter.
Yeah.
It doesn't include the green writing there.
Yes, let me see, where's some...
The third dot up.
Divine dream state, divine awake state, ordinary dream state, ordinary awake state. Doesn't have either divine or ordinary associated with sound sleep. Because that fana is annihilation, and it's actually the same everywhere. It's the nothing, actually. The moment of the nothing occurring within the domain of human experience.
It's only in sound sleep.
Yeah.
Presumably that the physical human person can not experience themselves.
And it's actually...
You're not
We're out
busy
of
winding up
the
in
orbit of
space
our
and sky.
falseness there. We're actually experiencing the original state of God in sound sleep.
of nothing. Yeah. Ourselves aren't getting in the way when we're in sound sleep.
So it seems to me that Baba has taken Fana Baqa and really given a lot more of a context for it all and brought it into his whole account of things. This whole topic is really, really worth studying. There's a lot more things we could look at about these states. These states of sound sleep, dream, and wakefulness are very fundamental to Baba's darshana. And Fana Baqa, it seems to me, is right rooted in the center of it. So it seems to me that one of the reasons why he kept coming back both to these three states and why he kept coming back to Fana Baqa is because it has a lot to do with the experience of the path and the course of progress. And when you enter into the path, you pass through an annihilation or a sound sleep and you wake up to something new. And what you were saying is, I'm sure these actually apply on a micro level to every moment of experience. The Fana and Baqa is always going on. It's always real.
Well, it's a nice idea that you might go to sleep tonight and wake up on the first line.
Yeah.
Every night it's a chance.
That's right.
Maybe tonight.
This will be the night, yeah.
Good luck.
Isn't that what happened with Muhammad the Must?
Well, he just all of a sudden went into a trance.
He woke up one morning
I thought it happened when he was doing something, wasn't he?
I think he was just
Gaining
getting up
activity.
and putting on his pants, and it was a lot. He go in this position.
So something must have happened in his sleep.
That's
His
right.
past life.
He came out on the other side of it. Yeah, his past life revisited him, and he. So I think of the path as on the far side of sound sleep.
Well, I'm going home to take a nap.
All right.
Well
This
done.
will inspire everybody to. So I guess in this point of view, if in some of these sessions people start dozing off, signs of progress.
Like we all tend to do in Mandalay Hall.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
You're just phenomenal.
Yeah.
You were just the attraction of the higher planes was just overwhelming.
Does mystical Christianity have anything about this sort of sleep dream stuff?
I'm not aware of that.
Well, they do have the divine nightmare and the dark night.
The dark night of the soul, there's that. They do have passing into darkness. They do have, St. John of the Cross would talk about dying to self and annihilation. That idea is there. This trinity, sound sleep, dream, wakefulness, as something of fundamental metaphysical significance. I see that in Vedanta. It's completely explicit there, and maybe other branches of Indian philosophy too, and of course in Baba. But I don't see it in the other traditions. Although
In the first discourse of the Buddha, he did say something, the world is asleep, I've come to awaken you. Maybe in a more metaphor.
Yeah, but it's sort of a metaphor like that. I mean, in very general ways. But Baba is quite explicit. When this cycle we go through, it's like we've split the unity of experience, and that the whole is right there in our daily cycle. But we do it one at a time instead of having the whole thing integrated.
Well, he's called the awakener.
Yeah. Right. And all you need is to have that awakening happening while you're sound asleep. That's all it takes. We're so close to it. I think when you realize God, of course it's stupid to say this, but if one could articulate it, it's like, man, I was so close for millions of years. I didn't realize how close we actually are.
We already had our initial awakening when Baba allows us to recognize who he is. We were asleep in this world. And then Baba came.
That's a kind of a Baqa, I suppose.
Yes.
So there's still hope.
Yes.
Well, any last things before it's 12 o'clock, I see. Yeah.
The 10 states of God has a good treatment on states 8, 9 and 10.
Yeah, that's really the classic.
It's nice to get Erich's sort of summation of it all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a masterful exposition. That 10 states of God chart does not have Fana in it, actually. Or Nirvana. That's not incorporated into it.
Yeah, not the chart, but the discussion. And it's only very brief.
Yeah.
but it's there all over it.
Where is it? What is it?
The last part of God Speaks is Erich's description of the 10 states,
Oh, okay.
as per the chart Baba gave him.
Okay, I forgot.
Actually, let me show you where we do have Nirvana presented. Nirvana really, and Fana, does not usually find its way into Baba's charts very much. It's sort of interesting. But the one that Lud Dimphal made does have it,
I think,
which is here. This chart, which, just to show it, it's not even showing. I mean, I'm sure you all know this intimately. But let's see, where is it? Yeah.
Can I use this for a second?
Okay.
Yeah, man,
I
what do you
think I
need?
can expand this further.
Point out one thing.
Help yourself.
Yeah, here we go. Yeah, so Lud worked it in here. The final Fana, annihilation of the mind, and elsewhere he calls it Manarnash. So that's interesting, isn't it? Manarnash. That'd be the final Fana. And right above it is Fana Phila, God realization, or Nirvakalpa. So this chart has it. This is actually a very good chart. I know it's a bit forbidding, but when you spend time with it, it's very helpful.
Is that in the new edition of God Speaks, not the old one? Is that the story?
Yeah, it's in the second edition. The only problem is that it easily falls out and gets lost.
Okay.
But if you spend an hour or two with this, it really reveals a lot.
Baba goes through a Mananash phase or
In the new life.
what can you say about that?
Well, actually, Dr. Ghani asked him, Baba, if you passed through God realization with Babajan, how is it that you're doing it again? And Baba said, only Ghani would have the chutzpah to ask a question like this. I wouldn't answer it.
You wouldn't answer.
No, but a speculation would be that Baba, on a universal level, as the avatar, as God become man, entered into the stage of the ordinary seeker, passed through that, and at the end of it, passed through that annihilation, as if doing it for
He kind of
everybody.
says that, though. He kind of says, I'm taking on the role of a seeker now.
Well, yeah, he did, yeah. So that
It's
would
not
be,
so much
the
speculation.
seeking culminates in Manarnash. That makes sense, doesn't it? Fana.
Mm.
He didn't use the word Fana, he heard the word Manarnash.
And what year was that, do you know?
That would be at the latter part of 1951. He began it like in October. And that was in Hyderabad that he began, with that cave and with those models.
Yeah, Monash Cave.
Yeah, and the models of the, with the car jumping over trees and stuff. That was the beginning of Manarnash. And it concluded at Marazan in 1952. And with the conclusion of Manarnash, the new life ended. And right after that, he declared himself as the avatar of the age. It looks like a sort of an archetypal thing. The seeker passing through, the universal seeker passing through Manarnash and then declaring in the avatar.
it seems the avatar, when he comes, he has to map out a path for the seekers of this age. The same with Buddha. Buddha was the avatar, he was already God, yet he has to go through all the stages of meditation to reach enlightenment so that his followers could follow that path. It seems that Baba did the same for us, and which ended in Nirvana.
Yeah.
And that's a good one as well. That's a good chart as well.
Which chart is that? I
Oh,
can't see.
it doesn't get much attention.
Is it in God Speaks?
Is it numbered?
Yeah, it's in God Speaks. It doesn't even have a number at the top of it.
Oh, but
It's just a Sufism reorientated, putting together what's inside into something intelligible.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of this stuff in God Speaks, you could really take one of these things and spend a long time on it, and you really do come out of it understanding things a lot better. Okay,
Thanks
well,
all.
thank you all very much. That's it for this year on this series.
Yeah, that's right. Well, it's not.
Now,
But